Good morning. I enjoyed the sunrise all alone, so here's the part that I included everyone in. It is super duper cold, 28 degrees here in sunny Oklahoma. Thank you for being with me. We were cut short yesterday, so I'm going to read the last paragraph of that story, and then we will roll into the next chapter. By the time her children began to marry, she was able to give them each a good strip of land and a little money. She was able to help them buy more land in places they preferred by selling her own tract by tract. And she saw them all begin well, though not all of them ended so well. They went about their own affairs, scattering out and seeming to lose all that sense of family unity so precious to the grandmother. They bore with her infrequent visits, and her advice and her tremendous rightness, and they were impatient of her tenderness. When Harry's wife died, she had never approved of Harry's wife, who was delicate and hopelessly inadequate at housekeeping, and who could not even bear children successfully, since she died when her third son was born. The grandmother took the children and began life again, with almost the same zest and with more indulgence. She had just got them brought up to the point where she felt she could begin to work the faults out of them. Faults inherited, she admitted fairly, from both sides of the house when she died. It happened quite suddenly one afternoon in early October. After a day spent in helping the Mexican gardener of her third daughter-in-law to put the garden to rights, she was on a visit in far western Texas and enjoying it. The daughter-in-law was exasperated, but apparently so docile. The grandmother, who looked upon her as a child, did not notice her little moods at all. The son had long ago learned not to oppose his mother. She wore him down with patient, just, and reasonable argument. She was careful never to venture to command him in anything. He consoled his wife by saying that everything mother was doing could be changed back after she was gone. As this change included moving a 50-foot adobe wall, the wife was not much consoled. The grandmother came into the house quite flushed and exhilarated, saying how well she felt in the bracing mountain air, and dropped dead over the door sill. What a way to go, huh? All right, and that was the very end of the last one. Let me see what that lady's name was. This is like 20 pages. Okay, well, I don't remember. It's somewhere in here. Yeah, there it is. Catherine Ann Porter, 1890 through 1980. Okay, so we move forward to the next lady, Linda Hogan. This is 1947, and then there's a dash and no other date. Should imply we don't know when she died. Linda Hogan. Linda Hogan is a Chickasaw poet, novelist, essayist, who teaches at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Her books of poetry and stories include Calling Myself Home, 1978, Eclipse, 1983, Seeing Through the Sun, 1985. Savings, 1988. Book of Medicines, 1993. And Red Clay, Poems and Stories, 1994. And her novels include Mean Spirit, 1990. Solar Storms, 1995. And Power, 1998. She has also written a collection of essays about nature called Dwellings, A Spiritual History of the Living World, 1995. In her writing, powerful images and great emotional depth are sometimes held by gauzy, dream-catcher words and ideas. The wood and birds in Making Do represent the time when the people believed in the spirit and the power of the animals they so carefully carved. For the woman who carves the birds, the old ways provide a kind of healing and grace. In the smallest signs of belief, life starts again. All right. Mind you, it is chilly, but I shall read to us best I can. Thank you for being with me. All right, Linda Hogan writes, Making Do. And now Crystal reads it to you. Making Do. Roberta James became one of the silent people in Seeker County when her daughter, Harriet, died at 6 years of age. Harriet died of what they used to call consumption. After the funeral, grandmother Addie went to stay with Roberta in her grief, as she had done over the years with her children and grandchildren. Addie, in fact, had stayed with Roberta during the time of her pregnancy with Harriet, back when the 15-year-old girl wore her boyfriend's black satin jacket that had a map of Korea on the back. And she'd visited further back than that, back to the days when Roberta wore white full skirts and white blouses, and the sun came in the door, and she lay there in the hot sun like it was ironed flat against the floor. And she felt good with clean hair and skin and singing a little song to herself. There were oak trees outside. She was waiting. Roberta was waiting there for something that would take her away. But the furthest she got was just outside her skin, that black jacket against her with its map of Korea. Addie never told Roberta a word of what she knew about divided countries and people who wear them on their backs. But later Roberta knew that her grandmother had seen way down the road what was coming and warned her in little ways. When she brushed Roberta's dark hair, she told her, "You were born to a different life, Bobby." After the funeral, Roberta's mother offered comfort in her own way. Life goes on. Neva said that she herself had long belonged to that society of quiet Indian women in Seeker, although no one would have guessed this of the woman who wore peach promise lipstick, smiled generously, and kissed the bathroom mirror, leaving a message for Roberta that said, "See you in the AM, love." Grandma, Addie, tended Angela, Roberta's younger daughter. She fed the baby, Angela, spoons full of meals honey and milk and held her day and night, while Roberta went about the routines of her life. The chores healed her a little, perking coffee and cleaning her mother's lipstick off the mirror. She swept away traces of Harriet with a splintered broom, picking up threads from the girl's dress, black hair from her head. Wiping away her footprints. That's funny. It's gonna do that several more times. So. Oh, good morning. How are you? All right, let's see if we can fit it between the horn. Between the horn. Okay. Occasionally, Neva stopped in, clasped her daughter's thin, cold hands between her warm ones, and offered advice. "That's why you all get married," she said. She wrapped Roberta's shoulders in a large gray sweater. All right. She wrapped Roberta's shoulders in a large gray sweater. "Then you'd have some man to help when things are down and out, like Ted here. Well, anyway, honey," she said at eye level to Roberta, "you sure drew a good card when Harriet was born, didn't she, Ted? Sure sugar, an ace." But when Roberta wasn't looking, Neva shook her head slowly and looked down at the floor and thought their lives were all hopeless. I love the end. It's so sad. The horn gives up. All right, we continue. In between horns, Roberta didn't get married like her mother suggested. She did take some comfort on those long nights by loving Tom Wilkins. Each night she put pieces of cedar inside his red wing boots to keep him close, and neatly placed them beneath her bed. She knew how to care for herself with this man, keep him close in almost the same space Harriet had abandoned. She wept slightly at night after he held her, and he said, there now," and patted her on the back. He brought her favorite windmill cookies with him from town, and he sang late at night so that the ghost of Harriet could move on more easily, like he eventually moved on when Roberta stopped placing cedar in his boots. "Why didn't that Wilkins boy come back?" I forgot to count how many. Because it's still pretty funny. probably the last line. He brought her favorite windmill cookies with him from town, and he sang late at night so that the ghost of Harriet could move on more easily, like he eventually moved on when Roberta stopped placing cedar in his boots. "Why didn't that Wilkins boy come back?" Grandma asked. "Choctaw, wasn't he?" Roberta shrugged, as if she hadn't left his boots empty of cedar. "He was prettier than me." She pushed her straggly hair back from her face to show Grandma what she meant. A month later, Roberta was relieved when the company summoned Tom Wilkins to Louisiana to work on a new oil field, and she didn't have to run into him at the store any longer. Roberta's next child, a son she named Wilkins after the father, died at birth, strangled on his own cord. Roberta had already worn a dark shawl throughout this pregnancy. She looked at his small, rough box and said, "He died of life, and I know that can happen." She held her grandmother's hand. Grandma Addie and Neva talked about Roberta. "A woman can only hold so much hurt," Grandma said. "And don't think I don't know it," said Neva. Roberta surfaced from her withdrawal a half year later, in the spring of 1974, when Angela looked at her like a little grandmother and said, "Mother, I know it's hard, but it's time for me to leave you," and immediately became feverish. Roberta bathed her with alcohol and made blessing root tea, which she dropped into the little Angela's rose petal mouth with an eyedropper. She prayed fervently to God or Jesus. She had never really understood which was which. And to all the stones and trees and gods of the sky and inner earth that she knew well, and to the animal spirits. And she carried her little angel to the hospital in the middle of praying, to that house made of brick and window and cinders, where dying bodies were kept alive, carried the girl with soft child skin in a small quilt decorated with girls in poky bonnets, and thought how funny it was to wrap a dying child, in such sweetness as those red-cheeked girls in the calico bonnets. She blamed herself for ignoring Angela and her own time of grief. 4 days later, Angela died, wearing a little corn necklace Roberta made, a wristlet of glass beads, and covered with that quilt. "She even told Roberta she was about to die," Neva told Ted. "Just like an old woman, huh, Bert?" Roberta went on with her silence through his third death, telling herself over and over what had happened, for the truth was so bad she could not believe it. The inner voice of the throat spoke and repeated the words of loss, and Roberta listened hard. "My angel, my Harriet, all my life gone and broken, while I am so young. I am too young for all this loss. She dreamed of her backbone, and even that was broken in pieces. She dreamed of her house in 4 pieces. She was broken, like the country of Korea or the land of the tribe. They were all broken. Roberta's thin-skinned father broken by the war. He and Neva raised 2 boys whose parents had gone off, as they say of those who come under the control of genie spirits from whiskey bottles. And those boys were certainly broken. And Neva herself had once been a keeper of the gates. She was broken. In earlier days, she read people by their faces and bodies. She was a keeper of gates, opening and closing ways for people to pass through life. This one has been eating too much grain, she'd say. Or, that one was born too rich for her own good and is spoiled. That one is broken in the will to live by this and that. She was a keeper of the family gates as well. She closed doors on those she disliked, if they were dishonest, say, or mean, or small. There was no room for smallness in her life, but she opened the doors wide for those who moved her slightly in any way, with stirrings of love or pity. She had lusty respect for belligerence, political rebellion, and for vandalism against automobiles or businesses or bosses, and those vandals were among those permitted inside her walls. And now she was broken by her own losses and her loneliness. Roberta cried against Addie's old, warm shoulders, and Grandma Addie stayed on, moving in all her things: cartons of canning jars, a blue-painted porcelain horse, her dark dresses and aprons, pictures of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, scented candles of the Virgin Guadalupe, even though she was never a Catholic, and the antlers of the deer. Roberta ignored her cousins from the churches of the brethren, this and that, when they came to comfort her in their ways, telling her that all things were meant to be, and that the Lord gives and takes. Uncle James was older, and so he said nothing, and she sat with him, those silent ones together. Roberta's mother left messages on the bathroom mirror. There is a time for everything in heaven. With Grandma there to watch over Neva and the house, Roberta decided one day to pack her dishes, blankets, and clothes into the old Chevy she had bought from Ted, and she drove away from the little square tombstones named Angela, Wilkins, and Harriet, though it nearly broke her heart to leave them. She drove away from all those trying to comfort her with what comforted them. The sorrow in her was like a well, too deep for young ground. The sides caved in with anger, but Roberta planned still to return for Grandma Addie. She stopped once on the flat, neutral land of Goodland, Kansas, and telephoned back. "You sure you don't want to come with me? It's kind of pretty out this way, Grandma. She lied. She smelled truck exhaust from the phone booth, and she watched the long, red-faced boys walking past. Those young men who had eaten so much cattle, they began to look like them. Just go and get settled. I'll be out to visit as soon as you get the first load of laundry hung on the line. Roberta felt her grandma smile. She hung up the phone and headed back to the overloaded, dusty, white car. She headed for Denver, but wound up just west of there in a mountain town called the Tropics. Was arid. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Its name was like a politician's vocabulary, a lie. In truth, the Tropics was arid. It was a mine town, uranium most recently. Dust devils whirled sand off the mountains. Even after the heaviest rains, the water seeped back into the ground between stores, and the earth was parched again. Still, Tropics conjured up visions of tall grasses in outlying savannas, dark rivers, mists, and deep green forests of ferns and trees and water-filled vines. Sometimes it seemed like they were there. Roberta told herself it was God's acres, that it was fate. She had missed the Denver turnoffs from the freeway, that here she could forgive and forget her losses and get on with living. She rented a cabin, got a part-time job working down at the Tropics grocery, where she sold single items to customers who didn't want to travel to town. She sold a bag of flour to one, a can of dog food to another, candy to school children in the afternoon. She sold boxed donuts and cigarettes to work crews in the mornings, and 32 beer to the same crews after 5. She dusted and stacked the buckling shelves, and she had time to whittle little birds, as her Uncle James had done. She whittled them and thought of them as toys for the spirits of her children, and put them in the windows so the kids would be sure and see them. This one's for Harriet. She'd tell no one in particular. When she didn't work, she spent her time in bed, completely still and staring straight at the ceiling. They used to say if a person is motionless, their souls will run away from the body, and Roberta counted on that. They say that once a soul decides to leave, it can't be recalled. Roberta lay in that room with its blue walls and blue-flowered blanket. She lay there, with her hair pulled back from her round forehead. She held the sunbonnet quilt in her hands and didn't move. To her disappointment, she remained alive. Every night, she prayed to die and join her kids. But every morning, she was still living, breathing. Some mornings, she pulled at her flesh, just to be certain. She was so amazed and despairing to be still alive. Her soul refused to leave. It had a mind of its own. So Roberta got up and began a restless walking. There were nights in the tropics that she hunted the dirt roads like a large-shouldered, thin-hipped ghost. like a tough girl, with her shoulders held high to protect her broken heart. Roberta Diane James, with her dark hair that had seemed worn thin from the hours she spent lying down, trying to send her soul away. Roberta with her eyes, the color of dark river water after a storm, when the gold stirs up in it. The left eye still held the trace of a wink in it, despite the thinness of skin stretched over her forehead. The smell of ivory soap on her as she tried over and over to wash the grief from her flesh. When I first heard how bad things were going for Roberta, I thought about going home. But I heard my other voices tell me it wasn't time. There is a season for all things, Mom used to say, and I knew Mom would be telling Roberta just that in her own words, and that Roberta would be fuming inside, as I had done with Mom's 50-cent sayings. I knew this much. Roberta would need to hold on to her grief and her pain. Us Chickasaws have lost so much. We hold on to everything. Even our muscles hold on to their aches. We love our lovers long after they are gone, better than when they were present. When we were girls, Roberta and I saved the tops of Coke bottle caps and covered them with purple cloth like grapes. We made clusters of grapes sitting out there on the porch or on tire swings in the heat, and we sewed the grapes together. We made do. We drank tea from pickle jars. We used potato water to starch our clothes. We even used our skinny dark legs as paper for tic-tac-toe. Now the girls turned bleach containers into hats, cutting them in fours and crocheting them together. Our Aunt Belle is famous for holding on and making do. There's a nail in her kitchen, or plastic 6-pack rings, a box for old jars, a shelf or box for everything, including all the black and white shoes she's worn out as a grown woman. Don't think these boxes or nails mean she's neat either. She's not. She has hundreds of dusty salts and pepper shakers people gave her, stacks of old magazines and papers, years of yellowed history, all contained in her crowded rooms. And I love her for it, for holding on that way. I have spent hours of my younger life looking at those shakers and reading those papers. Her own children tell her it is a miracle the viruses of science aren't growing to maturity in there. We save ourselves from loss in whatever ways we can. Collecting things, going out to dance land, getting drunk, reading westerns, or finding new loves. But the other side of all this salvation is that we deny the truth. When some man from town steals our land, we say, "Oh, he wouldn't do that. Jimmy Slade is a good old boy. I used to work for the Slades during the Depression." Never mind that the Slades were not the hungry ones back then. Some of us Southern Indians used to have ranches and cattle. They were all lost, piece by piece, or sold to pay for taxes on some land that was also lost. Now and then, someone comes around and tells us we should develop our land like we once did. Or they tell us just to go out in the world. We nod and smile at them. Now and then, some of us young people make a tidal wave in the ocean of our history, an anxiety attack in the heart monitor of our race. We get angry and scream out. We get in the news. We strip ourselves bare in the colleges that recruited us as their minority quota. And we run out into the snowstorm naked, and we get talked about for years as the crazy Indian that did this or that. The one that drove to the gas station and went straight to Canada. The girl who took out the garbage and never turned and went back. We made do. I knew some people from up north. You could always tell they were from up north because my friend's daughter had a walleye with a hook tattooed on her forearm. Once we went to a powwow together, and some of the women of the people wore jingle dresses with what looked like bells. What are those? I asked my friend. They were snuff can lids. Those women of the forests and woodlands, so much making do just like us. Like when we use silver salt cans in our dances instead of turtle shell rattles. We make music of those salt shakers. Though now and then some outsider decides we have no culture because we use store-bought shakers, and they are not traditional at all. I defy them. Salt is the substance of our blood, sweat, our secretions, our semen. It is the ocean of ourselves. Once I saw a railroad engineer's hat in a museum. It was fully headed. I thought it was a new style, like the beaded tennis shoes or the new beaded truckers' hats. But it was made in the late 1800s, when the Lakota were forbidden to make traditional items. The mothers took to beading whatever was available. Hats of the engineers of death. They covered colony cotton with their art. We make art out of our loss. That's why, when I heard Roberta was in Colorado and was carving wooden birds, I figured it made sense. Besides, we come from a long line of whittlers and table carvers, people who work with wood, including the Mexican great-grandfather who made santos and a wooden mask that was banned by the priests. Its presence got him excommunicated. Uncle James carves chains out of trees. We laugh and say it sounds like something they would do. Roberta was carving wooden birds, crows, mourning doves, and even a scissor tail or two. She sent some of the birds back home to have Aunt Belle put them on the graves of her little ones. I think she was trying to carve the souls of her children into the birds. She was making do. Oh, wow. Interesting. All right, the next one starts a whole new batch of stuff. Be first person, and we are just now right at the middle of this book. So it's taken me, what is this, 21 videos, and we're just now halfway. So we'll see how many more. I am literally a frozen popsicle. Little popsicle fingers. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you. I hope you've been enjoying our book. I'm going to pop it up here again for... Can we see it? There we go. Thank you for being with me. See you later.